I think that one's on the dance floor. Welcome to sunny San Diego. This is Gravity this season. Today we're going to talk about golf. Now, unlike the other program where it talks about general conditioning, I'm going to really get into some of the nitty-gritty of the function of one aspect. Today we're going to talk about the backswing, and we're only going to focus in on that right hip. So the right hip, one of the cannons in the golf swing, we're just going to take a look at it and see if we can recognize how much mobility and how much stability our client has. So in the backswing in golf, really kind of identifying the three planes of motion. If you can identify the three planes of motion at the hip, then you can take those three planes and create the exercise. So kind of the exercise is the test is the exercise. So when you go through the golf swing, right-handed golfer, in the backswing, if you take a look at the right hip, what happens is in order to load the butt in all three planes, we're going to go through what you see as femoral internal rotation. So relative to the pelvis, the femur is internally rotating. That lengthens the butt in the transverse plane. So that's kind of where we're going to look first, is that transverse plane. You see that external rotation, my butt goes out, I get a good load here. Now the other thing that happens is I'm going to bend forward. So as I come forward, a little bit of trunk flexion, that lengthens the glutes in the sagittal plane. So we've got our transverse plane, internal rotation. We've got our sagittal plane, a little bit of extension. And then the biggie, another biggie, is when you go through that swing, that backswing, and you can see that I'm adducted. When you're adducted at the right hip, your abductors are lengthened and fired. So the reason we do all this is to load in all three planes. We load in all three planes to explode in all three planes. So if you can really maximize the efficiency and take advantage of these big honkers back here, then I'm certain it's going to increase the at least the distance of your swing. Okay, in golf, big thing to know is your feet are in a fixed position. Now this is a good thing. So we have to figure out what is driving the motion. And what's driving it is this sucker right here, an external driver, the golf club. So the feet being in a fixed position, that's good because I can create a lot of torque even if I have those shoes on that grip you into the turf, then you're able to create a lot of torque throughout the body. But today we're focusing on the right hip of going through that swing. Now, with the feet in a fixed position, what we call this is we call it a top-down driver. Everything's reacting to the way I swing the club. So if I bring it back here, that's loading everything in the hip to go through that explosive motion. So we're going to ID those three planes of motion. What I call it is I basically simulate the action, and then I stimulate the sport. So I stimulate the muscles. So what would I do to kind of take a look at the athlete, the golfer, in all three planes of motion? I would choose a sport, or I'm sorry, an exercise like a lunge. Now you've got a lot of options with the lunge. As you know, you can go into a forward lunge, a reverse lunge, or even a lateral lunge. For today, I'm going to choose the backward lunge or forward lunge, whichever, facing this direction, so that I can talk to the camera. Now what we want to do is we want to put that leg in the same position as it is during a backswing, which means we need to load it in the transverse plane, we need to load it in the frontal plane, we need to load it in the sagittal plane. So the way I'm going to do that, and I'm going to keep my club handy, is kind of a crutch, because I don't have my balance today, it is a Monday, is I'm going to put myself into a lunge position. Now if you look here, what I can do is pre-position in flexion, so I know I'm going to get some stimulation in that sagittal plane. The way I can stimulate the femur-pelvis relationship in the transverse plane is to, again, just like the golf swing, use a top-down driver. Today I'm going to use the club. We're going to build up and use the medicine ball. For a brand new client, you may have them just use their hands. That's plenty of load. The weight of the arms, the weight of the trunk moving in space, all to load the right butt. So here we are in this lunge. Now, the reason we do these is to both take a look and kind of assess our client's ability to load in all three planes. If you find a deficiency in one of those planes, that gives you a lot of tools to work with on the specificity of the backswing. So in a forward lunge, if I go here, if I want to stimulate rotation, which is that internal rotation of the right femur, what's odd is I'm going to come to the right. So if I come down to the right, I'm really kind of internally rotating the femur. It's tough to see, but the femur staying where it is, My pelvis is moving to the right, which means my femur is internally rotating, which turns on my butt in the transverse plane. So this might be an exercise to help evaluate that. You know, even just staying on the ground first, rotating. This adds a whole new dimension to stability and balance, is to keep that foot on the glide board. So you may start with a rotational lunge. Are they able to do this? Are they able to get nice loading in the transverse plane? For flexion, for going into the sagittal plane, maybe you use the arm drivers and you just come out here, nice easy forward lunge or backward lunge, depending on who taught you. And then in the frontal plane, to drive our hip into adduction, which is going to fire up the abductors, I might do an overhead left lateral reach. So if I come over here, you can see I get a nice lengthening of the right hip, which really stimulates, turns on all the proprioceptors, just like they would in a golf swing. And that's it. So you've got frontal plane, you've got transverse plane, and you've got sagittal plane. You can apply that with the medicine ball, you can apply it with just the hands, and you have to start with success. So you might have to position a chair in front of the GTS for them to hold on to, or you can even hold on to their hands. Another thing we can do is we can look at adding bottom-up drivers. Now this gets more into, when we look at that functional exercise continuum, if we have the actual sport golf here, and we have something like an isolated training device down here, we want to stay towards this end. So we're going to creep back down here with a little bit of abduction, just to strengthen and condition the hips, the soft tissues, the osseous structures. Everything's going to be stimulated into a pure frontal plane movement. We call that tweaking in. We're going to do that, and then we're going to tweak it back out by coming back to the backswing and seeing if we can get a little bit more mobility. So you really have to find that balance of mobility and stability in that right hip. So for example, with hip abduction, this is a very popular exercise with your female clientele, and I'll just demonstrate, just in case you haven't seen it in a while, is typically you'll take your pulleys, drop them down to that first position, and you're going to see my left hip here, but you can see that if I'm in this position, I'm going to get pure abduction of the hips. So this is just an idea to help strengthen. If you find that your client has a deficiency in that plane of motion, then you can use all types of exercises really to kind of take advantage of the body, take advantage of the GTS, and strengthen. Even if you're working your squats, you can go into changing your foot position to take advantage of the frontal plane, the sagittal plane, or even the transverse plane with some plyometric skiing. So we've got another tool here. You can see I've got the Plyo Rebounder out. This is a real handy tool to have. If you don't have one, then the trainer is going to be the rebounder. And what I mean by that is you've got your, well, Brian gave me the big 6-pounder. He wants me to get a workout today. Let me get my breath on. And what you're going to do is start, you want to, again, take advantage of that rotational aspect. And you're just taking a two-legged trunk rotation, real fundamental exercise. And I can be throwing this right to my trainer rather than my client, or rather than the rebounder. Then you grow, you build on this. So if you're going to go into more stability, maybe you put your client in a single leg balance. We call this single leg balance right. So they can toe touch, and once they get real good, they'll do this same movement with no toe touch. I'll see what I can do here. So if I'm coming through this, then I'm getting a real nice external or internal rotation, again, which translates to power in the right butt. You can see this 40-pound ball that Brian gave me is throwing me off. But you can see I'm really loading and exploding. Loading, exploding. Loading, exploding. Loading, exploding. That's good stuff. Now if you want to get real tricky, you can do this same thing with the frontal plane. Now I can do things like I can use the GTS. I can go into a kneeling position, which I'm going to go again with the left hip so you see this. Bring my pulley up, and it's all I'm thinking is frontal plane now. Frontal plane, hip, I need to stimulate abduction. So if I anchor in, get into a kneeling position here, and even just doing something this may look a little like the Pilates moves, but if I can lean into this and really rotate out, not rotate, but just drive through the frontal plane, then I'm getting a lot of lengthening up the obliques and you could drive that pelvis towards the squat stand to really take advantage of this and get a lot of stimulation for that left hip, which we're looking at right hip today, so we apologize for that, just to drive that motion. So we have frontal plane. Adduction stimulates the abductors. We've got internal rotation of the femur, stimulates the butt, stimulates the external rotators, and you have sagittal plane, which you can do squats, lunges, anything where you're working extension of the hip to basically fire up the glutes in the sagittal plane. I really hope this type of training helps you deliver specificity to your clients, and we'll continue with this. Next time we may look at the left hip, we may look at the right shoulder, but today's course is really on the right hip, focusing on the 3 planes of motions, identifying what type of mobility your client has, are they able to do those motions, and then how much strength do they have to be able to load and explode through that range of motion. So again, we're here enjoying the sunny weather in San Diego. Thanks for watching Gravity This Season Golf, the right hip in 3D.